But me, I am just a man. And every night I shut my eyes, so I don't have to see the light shining so bright. I dream about a cloudy sky, about a cloudy sky. And every night I shut my eyes, but now I got them open wide. You're falling into my hands, and now you're burning me, and now you're burning me. And every night I shut my eyes, so I don't have to see the light.
All right, hello, my friends. Hello again. I am back, and we are going to continue talking about some of the material in my book, The Sleeper Agent: The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. In this video, I do not have an article written yet, but I just have been kind of flooded with ideas. I'm like, man, yeah, I should talk more about this, or I should talk more about that. And so I'm just going to record them without making articles, and I may just make the blog post afterwards, but I'm just going to run through some things that would be really great to clarify. Or no, in this video, we're going to talk about the U.S. Simulant Program, a biological simulant program, not stimulant like coffee, simulant like a simulation, S-I-M. And for the longest time, I thought it said stimulant test, but it was actually simulant, S-I-M-U-L-A-N-T, simulant. And what a simulant test is, it's a simulation of a bioterror attack, basically, using what are thought to be harmless microbes. And what they do is they spray them all over the place, and they can do this from planes, they can do this from fog machines, and they have all sorts of other ways. They can spray from ships off the coast, and all sorts of ways, but just they run these tests nationwide. They did this, they started doing this, in World War II, and then especially after World War II in the 50s, especially when we brought a lot of the Nazis over here in Operation Paperclip, like Eric Traub. He was actually a supervisory bacteriologist, and he was supervising many of these tests. And it was found, so they used several kinds of bacteria. One was Bacillus globigii. It's a form of Bacillus subtilis, which is sometimes found in like probiotics, even though not necessarily good for you, because they've been finding that these probiotic strains of Bacillus subtilis can actually cause sepsis in the immunocompromised. And a lot of people nowadays, like everybody is immunocompromised to some degree. But these, so it was Bacillus globigii, and it's a variant of Bacillus subtilis, but it can often be hard to distinguish between one that causes food poisoning, and I think it's called Bacillus cereus, and then Bacillus subtilis variant Niger, which is Bacillus globigii. That was one of them. Then another one they used was called Serratia marcescens. It used to be called Bacillus prodigiosus because it creates this red pigment on things for some reason. And Eric Traub, in my book, I can show that he actually weaponized Serratia marcescens with the virus bovine papular stomatitis. But they used Serratia marcescens in a lot of tests, and that actually led to the death of a San Francisco man, and many hospital infections. And these infections were very resistant to treatment. It caused a lot of urinary tract infections, pneumonia, all sorts of problems, and they were very resistant to antibiotics. So there's that. Then they used they used a fungus, and it's a fungus that can cause serious, life-threatening infections, and it's called Aspergillus fumigatus. Aspergillus fumigatus, and the mycotoxins on Aspergillus fumigatus are carcinogenic. And they were spraying that all over the place. Let's see, what else did they use? Serratia marcescens they used. Sometimes they use this other fungus, Coccidioides immitis. But Bacillus glabigii and Serratia marcescens are the known ones. But there were also other ones that they used, and it was in this Canada document. Okay, here we go. They used E. coli. Okay, they used strains of E. coli. They used vaccinia virus, which is the smallpox vaccine. So they were doing simulant tests with that. Open air simulant tests. And that's the thing about these simulant tests. They're done over populated areas. They use Staphylococcus citreus. And they sometimes claim to have just used zinc cadmium sulfide. But it looks like, and what I couldn't understand was like, okay, you're gonna spray this all over the place to see how it spreads out. Okay, and then after you do that, you know, as many times, don't you kind of already know how it spreads out, and what's the point of continuing to do it constantly? And they are doing that. And I found it's probably because they're doing aerogenic vaccines. Because when I saw what they were doing with the vaccinia virus, they were using it as a simulant. It's like, okay, and then the zinc cadmium sulfide, they probably often bind it to the bacteria to supposedly kill it, even though you can't really kill bacteria and viruses. Like, you can bind metal to these things, but it doesn't necessarily kill it. It may inactivate it for a time, but this process is highly reversible. So there was in 1955, and these tests were done in cooperation, Britain, Canada, and the United States. They did these tests all over the United States, Canada, and Britain. And they did them they ran these joint research with all three countries involved. And there was one where they talked about vaccinia virus. It says UK outlined it says 10th tripartite report, September 1955. UK outlined the work done on vaccinia, emphasizing that this was very much an interim report. Because vaccinia was relatively safe, easy to produce, and easy to assess, it was used as a simulant in both laboratory and field trials in order to gain information on the use of smallpox virus variola as a biological warfare agent. The vaccinia material was stable at 60 degrees Celsius, stood up well under freezing and thawing, and could be freeze-dried without reduction in titer. In the spray work, it was found that the virus was as stable as BG spores, or Bacillus glabigii spores, although the spray factor varied with different batches. And they were also doing live agent tests, apparently in the Bahamas or in the Caribbean. It says, UK Annual Report, September 1955, test sphere. Nearly 100 experiments have been conducted, sometimes lasting over 2 to 3 days and on other occasions more than one per day. The first object was correlation with the last field test using the same 4 agents. Brucella suis, Bacterium tularens, that's tularemia, Venezuelan equine encephalomyelitis virus, and vaccinia virus. The selected temperatures and humidities included those of the Bahamas Nights trials done in the absence of ultraviolet light, and the same spray device was used. And decades later, there's another document that I found, and I talk about it in here, from 1993, where they were trying to assess what vaccines they could use as standard simulants that they could spray all over the place. And you just heard me talk about how they were doing it with vaccinia, thinking that it was relatively safe. Well, here in 1993, they assess it once more, and this is what they say. Despite its extensive use for immunization of the human population against smallpox, vaccinia virus is a virus of relatively high pathogenicity with a long, if sporadic, history of lethal infections and post-vaccinal encephalitis. Even more serious than the standard complications listed in the submission is the prospect of vaccinal pneumonia in a population now almost devoid of the individual or herd immunity resulting from smallpox vaccination. Vaccinia virus must unquestionably, therefore, be excluded. So they conclude that after using it as a standard simulant for many years. Probably because they had more accidents happen. And if you saw my other video about the blackmail and biological warfare, well, a lot of that had to do with these kinds of tests. And a lot of these tests had secret acts of sabotage carried out through them. And open-air tests on populated areas with dubious simulants have been consistently carried out since the Biological Warfare Program began, and this is actually still going on today. Like, what people don't understand is they think that, oh, this just happened in the 50s. It happened in the 50s, but it continued all the way up to today, and it is still going on today. And laws actually permit it, even though they're experimenting on the population. And in another video, I'm going to go over those laws that actually allow unrestricted testing of all kinds, open-air experiments of all kinds, just as long as they say it's to protect against biological weapons and agents. That allows them a free pass, free reign on the population, basically. And it's absolute insanity. And the average person has no idea that this stuff is even going on. No idea. I mean, I was shocked at all of the stuff that I found, but it's all talked about in this book. But that's what the simulant program was, and the simulant program, they got this idea from German intelligence, because in 1933, German intelligence did these simulant tests in the subways of London and Paris. And what they did was they dropped light bulbs filled with this Serratia marcescens bacteria, and they did this in the subway stations and allowed it to travel all over the place, and then they collected samples to figure out how it spread out. And they did this secretly, German intelligence, in London and Paris in 1933. And then the Nazis were doing it during World War II. And then after the war, when we started taking all those Nazis, like Eric Traub over here, then we started doing it hardcore. And we actually, there was something called Operation LAC, which meant large area coverage. And if you looked up Operation LAC on like Wikipedia, it would say that it was just a small test with zinc cadmium sulfide in St. Louis, but actually there's a document from Canada that was declassified, okay, and shows that actually this looks like something that was a much, much larger program and was carried tests of all kinds nationwide, with not just zinc cadmium sulfide, but with all the because all these other ones are talked about, like E. coli, aspergillus, staphylococcus, bacillus subtilis, variant Niger, all sorts of different bacteria. And we actually did one of those subway tests too. Sometime between 1955 and 1956, light bulbs filled with Bacillus glabigii were thrown on the train tracks of a New York subway and carried through the subways, theoretically exposing more than 1 million people. It was known as Operation Big City. And they now find that Bacillus glabigii is documented to cause detrimental health effects, just like Serratia marcescens is also, and led to deaths because of it. There was a man from San Francisco, his name was Edward Nevins, and he died as a result of these open air tests. And there was a hearing on these simulant tests in 1977, and there's a big document of the whole hearing, and they talked about how widespread these were. And these simulant tests also included insect tests, spreading insects all over the place to see how they spread out, whether it's ticks on birds or mosquitoes being released in open areas. You know, they claim they aren't infected, or they will claim that they're infected with a harmless tracer simulant. But again, they often find later on the stuff wasn't so harmless. And Eric Traub was running those tick tests on birds, releasing them, and they had a large-scale avian vector program to see how, you know, the birds could spread these ticks all over the place. So that essentially, in a nutshell, is the simulant program. And if you read my book, you'll see chapter 11 is called Vector Weapons and Simulant Attacks. It's an entire chapter on it, and it gives you an in-depth view, and it shows, which I'm going to cover in the next video or another video. We're going to talk about Title 50, Section 1520, and Title 50, Section 1520A. The laws that allow unrestricted testing of all kinds without our knowledge and without our consent. So, it's like as bad as Nazi Germany. I mean, this is something that Nazi Germany would be doing. You know what I mean? So, it's important for people to know about this stuff so we can try and put a stop to it. So, I'm going to leave it there. And with that said, everybody, Take care of yourself, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.
Time